Welcome to the AFCEA Leadership Forum 5-Question Series. I'm Max Kakis, Defense Editor of Signal Magazine. Our guest today is T. Wood Parker, Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors and Chairman of the Board of Advisors for TASC. Mr. Parker serves these positions after retiring from the job of Chief Executive Officer of TASC. During his 6 years as CEO, he led the company through its separation from Northrop Grumman and reestablishment as an independent firm. His experience prior to Northrop Grumman includes work as a managing partner for PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP, as well as 20 years of service in the U.S. Navy. Wood, welcome to AFCEA. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Max. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I wanted to start out with a question that was suggested to me by reading your biography. It says that as part of your current job, you're responsible for recruiting the best people to the company's workforce. Now, based on that, when you look for people to come to work at TASC, what would you say are the characteristics in an individual that would mark that person as a potential leader?
Well, Max, a number of characteristics or attributes come to mind when you ask that question. I think when we are looking for potential leaders, one characteristic or attribute would be authenticity. A person has to be his or her own person. She can't be someone else. Indeed, when someone tries to adopt the style of someone else, it comes across as false, comes across as phony, and it undermines the effectiveness of that person as a leader. Another attribute would be passion. You know, Max, I don't care what area of life or endeavor it may be, to me, every winner shows passion about something. And the same thing applies to leaders today. A leader needs to be passionate about the mission of the organization, about success, about the excellence that he or she is trying to achieve, and so passion is an important attribute. In addition, values are important today, particularly when we're looking for leaders. And to my way of thinking, integrity is the most important value. I would go so far as to say that integrity is the trait that, above all others, that people demand of their leaders. And indeed, without integrity, there's no real moral authority for leadership. And the final attribute that comes to mind, I think, is character. Now, character can encompass integrity, perhaps, but I think it involves much more. And the reason it's important for potential leaders is that trust is the foundation of leadership. I think that people will accept mistakes when it comes to competence or ability, as long as the leader admits that mistake and is growing as a leader, but people will not accept a character flaw. And when we talk about trust, when someone has a strong character, people will trust them. Without that trust, there's no basis for leadership.
Well, kind of related to that then, you talked about authenticity. How do you measure authenticity?
Well, it's somewhat like character, I think. You know it when you see it. But authenticity is to be authentic, to be real, to be consistent, to be your own person. And I think it shows up more in a negative than in a positive.
I see. Well, now you talked about the characteristics. Let's talk a little bit about the skills. What are the skills that are important for a leader to have in order to make the most of those characteristics that you just outlined for us?
Well, once again, a number of skills or capabilities come to mind. I think leaders have to be able to communicate. They have to be able to communicate their vision, the direction of the organization. They have to be able to communicate the initiatives that might be undertaken. And the good news for those of us who serve in these positions, one can improve their communication skills through training and through coaching and things of this nature, but a leader has to be able to communicate. So communications is an important skill. And Max, I think that it's important, particularly for senior leaders, to be able to teach. Teaching is an important skill, and what I'm thinking about when I say that is that I believe that the days of the superhuman CEO or the superhuman commanding general are over, or at least fading. Successful organizations of the future need leaders throughout the organization at all levels, and therefore it's incumbent upon the leaders to train, to teach, to develop leaders for the overall organization. And then finally, I think that it's incredibly important to have a skill that enables someone, a leader, to connect with people, to relate with people. I'm one who believes that the successful companies and organizations of the future are those that can successfully tap into the initiative and the creativity and the energy of their employees. And to do that, you've got to be able to connect, to be able to relate, to be able to leverage those capabilities of the employees. Some may say, well, what about our huge organizations that are scattered out geographically? One doesn't have to be person to person to connect with people. We see that need or that capability, that skill in our political leaders and in coaches. The important thing is that that is an important skill for a leader.
Well, now keeping in mind the premise in a lot of management that you manage what you can measure, what would you say are the indicators or milestones that indicate whether someone's leadership style is working or not working?
Let me come back to the way you posed the question in just a moment, Max, but in terms of success of a leader, I think there are organizational indicators and there are what we may call people indicators. On the organizational side, when you're talking about a company, we've got the normal metrics of company success, the growth in revenue, the growth in earnings, the increased stock price, things of that nature. And it's important, by the way, to use those metrics to determine the success or the effectiveness of a leader, because the purpose of that leader is indeed to produce results, whether it be in the private sector companies, whether it be in the military, because that person has to be able to produce results in terms of the success of the mission of that organization. So there are metrics on the organizational side. On the people side, we've got metrics like the retention metrics, are you retaining the right people and things of this nature. But I think more importantly from the success of a leader is whether or not the people are engaged, whether or not they are manifesting that creativity and that initiative that we referred to earlier. And the important thing for a leader in terms of its people is to see, are the people helping their colleagues address and overcome problems and overcome questions? And one can discern that in terms of the effectiveness or success of a leader. Let me come back to the way you posed the question about leadership style. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a question of style, and as I said when we were talking about authenticity, I think there's a danger when one tries to change one's style or one's approach because it can come across as negative or it can come across as phony.
Not authentic.
Exactly. One can certainly change the strategy. One can change the initiative that might be underway. One can change or consider changing some of the people in certain positions in the organization. Mm-hmm. But I would submit that you need to be yourself in terms of leadership style.
Okay. Well, looking back on your career as a leader, at one point you did serve in the U.S. Navy. I believe you commanded a destroyer at one point. And based on a look at your own leadership style and how you served as a leader, what would you consider your greatest failure, and what would you say you learned from that particular failure?
Well, Max, whether you're talking about a 20-year career in the military or whether you're talking about a couple of decades in business like I've experienced, one will make mistakes during that period of time. And I've certainly made my share of mistakes. And I think in my case, it is usually related to speed of decision. I think about the times when I've looked at people in terms of whether or not this is the right person for a given position. Can this person step up and perform at the level that we are requesting of that individual? And I'm a person who believes in people, and I believe in the potential greatness of just about every person. And so there have been times where I've given that person a second chance, or maybe a third chance. And looking back on it, my instincts were probably correct in the beginning, and I should have gone ahead and made the decision. So it's about speed of decision. And you know, Max, I might mention that when we're talking about failures or whether we're talking about mistakes, I think another attribute that's important for leaders is one of resilience. Resilient people anticipate that there will be mistakes. My goodness. The world is complex, business is complex, people are complex. We've got competitors, we've got the independent will of other people and entities. things are not always going to go smoothly. And so resilient people, resilient leaders anticipate that, and they learn from those mistakes. They grow as a result of those mistakes. And effective leaders take that resilience on a personal level and leverage it into the organization so the organization becomes resilient as we experience mistakes.
Well, that's a good jumping off point for my last question for you. Who do you consider a hero? Who do you look at as someone that you try to emulate and that you try to model yourself upon?
Well, I have many heroes, Max. One I'll mention is my father. My dad was the classic Southern farm boy in the generation that many of us refer to as the greatest generation. My dad, his father abandoned the family, and when my dad was in the 8th grade, my dad dropped out of school, became the man of the house, worked the farm, and I've learned many things from my father. One of that is the value of work and the importance of hard work and a strong work ethic. And I think the way it pertains to my operation or my behavior today is I quite frankly have little patience and tolerance for people who don't work hard or don't carry their share of the load. But my dad is a hero. I think that we talked about values earlier, and I highlighted the value of integrity. And I believe that when I think of integrity, two people come to mind. Actually, many people come to mind, but two that are at the forefront right now. One is Billy Graham. Billy Graham, the famous preacher or evangelist, he's a man who is elderly now, and he never achieved success in the basic metrics or way we define success in our society today. But who in America today cannot say that Billy Graham was a man of honesty, a man of character, a man of faith, and a man of integrity? He's a hero of mine. And then finally, I would submit that Elliot Richardson is a person who exemplifies and manifests that value of integrity. He did what he thought was right, even in the face of a direct order of the President of the United States. He did not carry out that order, but he did what is right. And as we look back on history today, we know he was correct. He had to resign his position at the highest levels of government, but he did that, and he is representative of that value of integrity and is a hero of mine.
Well, very good. Wood, on that note, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and perspectives on leadership with us today. We appreciate your support and want to wish you the best of luck on your future endeavors.
Thanks very much, Max. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.